Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Verbal Assault Livestream. I'm your host, Mark P. Devereaux. We are a political podcast with viewpoints from left, right, and center. We are coming into in real time with real people talking about real issues. We are joined today by Cherokee Black YouTube personality and writer. We are joined by Mr. Kirk Adair. He is an author himself, as well as a documentarian. We have Mr. Sam Schwartz, a proud Marxist and socialist. Mr. Samuel Kachera is my co-host, and let me not forget, seems like I just got everybody. Samuel Kachera is my co-host. He is an international entrepreneur, and he is also a well-traveled brother. How is everybody feeling today?
Fine.
Delightful.
Delightful, fine, and so let's go into a delightful topic.
Yeah.
It's really... Some time ago, a Muslim judge was found floating in the river. No one seems to have had any answers to this, and it's odd. It's odd because if our justices are at some risk, if congressional members are at risk, the question is the executive branch trying to compromise the congressional and judicial branches? Cherokee, would you mind taking that question?
The judge was a Muslim. She was the first female Muslim judge appointed by Cuomo to the Court of Appeals. And
a judge in New York State.
Excuse me?
She was a judge in New York State.
Yes.
Right.
And she lived in Harlem, and she was last seen on her stoop, and they later found her body in the river. I'm not sure. Being female and Muslim, I don't know. She was the first female Muslim judge appointed to the Court of Appeals, which is one of the highest courts you can be appointed to. I'm thinking that it might be because she was a female Muslim. I don't know.
Okay, and just for the audience's sake, she was of African descent, from what I understand.
Yeah, she was African American. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Kirk Adair, would you say that the executive branch is attempting to compromise the power of the congressional or the judicial branches?
Are you talking about federal or state?
I would be talking about federal, but we seem to be having a national situation here where judges are being compromised even on the state level as well. On the federal level, would you say that the executive branch is trying to compromise the power of the others?
Well, first, very briefly on the judge who was found floating in the river, what was the case she was working on? I think that would be a little bit more appropriate as to what case was she being offered or what case was she on? Because if she was going to make an impeccable decision, then somebody took her out for a very specific reason. On the federal branch, right now, it is necessary in order to combat the deep state for the president to extend his powers, which were granted actually during the period of Franklin Roosevelt to combat sedition in the country, all right, in many ways. What's going on right now is vital to the survival of the republic, that certain powers be extended, because there's a lot of covert activity that's going on that's being ignored and downplayed by the media, that the present president unfortunately has to deal with. And they're powers that actually were extended to the previous two presidents but went unnoticed because the media, and were used differently because the media chose to ignore them.
Okay.
I don't think that he's trying to necessarily overpower Congress, but the point is Congress has been compromised because you look at you look at Mitch McConnell, he's in the Chinese pocket. You look at the opposition and basically Schumer are in so pocket. So in order to clean up the mess, you have to basically influence than is normally expected from the executive branch. The judicial branch has been compromised for a long time in some ways by previous executive orders. So in answer to your question, it would be yes, to a certain extent. In answer to your question about the judge that was found floating in the river, it's whatever case she was working on at that point came to the point that special interests decided that she had to be removed from that case. That's where you follow it. You follow the money. You follow the scent. You follow the smell.
Cherokee Black, you live blocks away from Harlem, blocks away. I know you wanted to add something a few minutes ago.
Oh, I was going to say that she was for gender equality, and that it might have had something to do. She was appointed in 2013. She was murdered in 2017. It might have had something to do with a case about that community.
Okay.
Involving that community. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I don't know.
Sure. And the director has sent me a note saying that the GBLT community hailed her as a hero for some of the cases that she gave a positive ruling on, right, in that regard of giving for this gender equality as you speak of. So I'm gonna just move into a different direction here. I'd like to ask Sam Schwartz, why is law enforcement the enemy?
Well, it's not the enemy of the people that make the law. You have to understand that the laws basically are made by the people that rule to manage that system of capitalism, and that's the ruling class of capitalists. So those laws, how they fall on the rest of us, the 90% of us, right, are not our laws. We didn't make them, and they usually have to do with oppressing us in one way or the other because they're carried out by the police, especially, and it's not for our benefit. Well, if it was for our benefit, meaning the majority of Democrat, we say we're a democratic society. Well, if it's a democratic society, we would be 90% of us would actually have rule through our organizations directly, and we would make laws like free education, free health care from birth to death, housing, good quality housing, maybe 10%. And the rentals would be 10% of our salary, something like that. Everybody, full employment, and the amount of hours we work and how many we need would be determined by us. And right now, I say that and our organization feels the most you can work is 20 hours a week. Would be great, but we don't have any say in that. That's done by the capitalists. You get 20 hours of work a week for 40-hour pay, 45 hours pay. That's what we say. So we can afford. We'd also have COLA back, so you can keep up with the cost of living, things like that. We don't have any say in that.
Okay, give me a second.
Representatives that represent us in the Congress who make the laws. They make the laws for the capitalist class.
Okay, Sam, let me cut in for a second. Cherokee, I know you wanted to add something very quick.
I don't remember now. I'm old.
Sorry.
It's okay. Important for us to limit ourselves to within a minute, just for that reason. Cherokee, let me ask you this. Should we be concerned about a race war? Because this judge was African-American and she was Muslim, and we seem to often be demonizing people of color. Should we be concerned about a race war?
There have been talks about it over time, and yes, I mean, there have been ruffle, things said about a race war, that this was the beginning of, if they keep killing black men, there'll be a race war. There's a lot of reasons. I don't know if if it should be a race war as much as it will be a class war. The middle class, the 99% against the privileged 1%.
Okay. That's and Sam Schwartz likes to make it a point. Sam, not everyone is viewing, so why don't you go ahead and mention that website, and then I'm going to jump over to Mr. Samuel Kuchera. Why don't you go ahead and mention that website?
Oh, it's socialistrevolution.org. If you want to know more about the ideas that I'm talking about, I'm not talking because I'm making this up out of my head. For a deeper understanding of what I'm trying to get at, you have to understand Marxism. And this is our program is in this. It's in socialistrevolution.org. You can read about our program, our demands on what we want for society. And you learn about Marxism, and you learn about
Paul Robeson was a socialist, and they called him a communist and went after him. But at that time, it was the Socialist Party. Communism was viewed as a better party for black people because it seemed more fair. How it turned out, I don't know, but I know that he took a bunch of black people to Russia at one point, and they never came back because they thought it was a better life. I'd like to know what happened to them. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what happened to them.
Okay.
I know that.
Mr. Kirkader, should we be concerned about a race war?
Yes and no. Yes, because there are certain interests that are pushing that are exacerbating that, not least the media, not least George Soros, not least Antifa. When we were discussing earlier in the week, Black Lives Matter and Antifa, Black Lives Matter is very worthwhile because it is pointing out that there are situations that may need to be redressed. Antifa, on the other hand, is a provocateur, an agent provocateur organization that is pushing violence on anything with a specific agenda. And that agenda is, one of those specific agendas is a race war, as another part of divide and conquer.
You're saying that this would be coming from Antifa? Am I to understand that?
Well, they're pushing behind it, yeah. I mean, because, for instance, Black Lives Matter have subjects that really need to be dealt with. The police don't need to be defunded. They need to be disciplined. They need to be changed. They need to have a different teaching. The police have been militarized since George Hiram Walker Bush Sr. And that was specifically done. And then following George Hiram Walker Sr., you had Clinton, who wrote, whose best buddy, Biden, wrote the 3 Strikes You're Out for the prisons for profit nonsense, which was against the black community. It was against the black family. It had very, very specific agendas. Biden defended it in the Senate, loved it, wrote the whole thing. Clinton signed it. So there's been an agenda going on for some time. Shay Jackson did a phenomenal podcast on this, explaining it step by step, and I recommend it to everybody. I sent it to Cherokee. If I can send it to you, I will, because he's absolutely defined it from Hiram Walker Bush Sr., because that was the Republican Party stance at that point. And for the most part, it still is, because it's the banker's standpoint. It's the 1%, the Koch brothers, and you can lump them all in. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Soros, the whole lot. they're all on top, and they want us all fighting among ourselves. And the easiest demarcation for everybody to be fighting among themselves is the subject of race in the United States, because it hasn't been properly addressed. The education hasn't been properly changed. The police departments have been militarized with a very specific agenda, because if the police were doing to white people what they had been doing to black people for the last 20 years, there would be this problem would have been solved. So it was very simple. And Bush Sr. started it, and it's part of an MK Ultra mind control program that was started by the 1%. And by the way, MK Ultra is a product of Operation Paperclip. It was a Nazi program that was brought over here, and the Rockefellers and Henry Ford were very much in favor of having it established as a very specific method of controlling the population. Does that help?
Okay. You have basically lifted the veil and said Republican. I'd like to hear from Samuel Kuchera to see his thoughts on the association. He says Bush Senior, baby. What do you think, Samuel?
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to associate all that right now. Kirk Adair is a man full of information, so I like listening to him. Some agree with, disagree with, but that's the point of this show. I mean, that's what we do. In terms of starting race war, I kind of feel like we're small. Or at least
repeat that, Sam. I'm sorry, we missed you on that. You said you kind of feel what?
I kind of feel like we're in a race war at the moment, or at least in the very beginning of one. I think there's a lot of push right now on what's happening with the way that black people are treated by the police force. I also agree with Kirk. Defunding is not a proper answer. It's not a good solution.
Definitely not.
If we defund the police, I mean, who do we go to when someone's child just got raped? Or,
now hold on now, because that's tomorrow's subject. Don't elaborate on it too much. Save it for Friday, brother.
All right.
I know you had some questions that you wanted to throw out and ask the panel as well.
Well, yeah, it was a little bit off the subject, off the Muslim judge being murdered, but yeah, just getting back to like the riots and stuff. I mean, these are the topics of today. So
right on.
So I think I asked it before, but I'll ask it again: do we think that the protests and the rioters, are they the same? What does the panel think about that? Are the protesters and the rioters, are they the same? Are they one and the same? Or is their cause the same? Can anybody answer?
I would say no way, Jose. No way are they the same.
They're not the same. So,
no way.
So, yeah, yesterday's program, I didn't get an answer. Like, what's the solution? How do we stop it?
Is it for us to stop it as citizens?
If not us, then who?
Well, this is where Sam Schwartz's contribution, though he may seem extreme in some of his viewpoints to some, those people that are doing the looting are probably desiring the very things that they don't have access to in their minds. And so when we offer everyone similar opportunities, it gives everyone access. No? When people don't have access, they crave things and they will go to an extreme to get that access. We're seeing that extreme. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You don't think that this is just their mischievous side using this period of time as an excuse to be set free?
That's a good question. I would say that we take Black youths, youths of African descent, and what we do is we sort of put them in this box where they're fighting an uphill battle. We're telling them they're not as intelligent. we're telling them that they are criminals. We're calling them criminals and we're calling them thugs. So if they should act like criminals and thugs, why should we? Because this is how we're labeling them. In a previous program, I asked, why do Caucasians seem to know the statistics on black crime, supposedly, but they don't know the statistics on white crime? The whole panel went silent. No one has a desire to find out that information. No one.
Well, that's because
we don't have a desire to ask for it.
It's deliberate. They don't want us to know. It's deliberate. They're demonizing black people. So of course we're going to know that. We're going to know those statistics first. White people commit crimes. They commit murders. They commit rapes.
And Kirk, were you adding something? I'm sorry, Kirk. Were you adding something?
Yeah, because I completely agree with Cherokee. The liberal agenda has been to monitor that, to keep that down. I mean, it's a Republican and a Democratic problem. It's the 1% call themselves, they divide themselves in half. They're Republican, they're Democrat. They're both on the take.
Right.
They're both, they both have their hands in the public pocket in so many ways. Some of them more obviously, some of them less obviously. But the point is that I totally agree with what Cherokee was saying. The liberal agenda has been to pacify the situation by not bringing up white-on-white crime. And then you have to look at the media, which the media has consistently, in all of their films and everything that they're doing about the drug war, about this, about that, they don't show so much the white mafia anymore. Now they show, only black people as drug dealers, which is absolute rubbish and nonsense. But black actors in Hollywood, they can't get cast except as a thug, because that's what Hollywood is cranking out, that shit.
That's right.
And it's across the board. But again, Hollywood is a liberal form of media. It's certainly not conservative. And I mean, I'm a liberal. I find it offensive because that's the way the scripts are being written, because that's the agenda that's being pushed.
But you're
it's
also
like welfare. I'm sorry. It's like welfare. When they talk about welfare statistics, they always give you the visual of black and Latinas on it, and not whites. When in New York, Hasidics are a large population, and Russian Jews are a large population of the welfare environment. But you never see them. You don't hear about them.
And we wouldn't dare talk about.
All, on the
what?
Go ahead, Kirk. Again.
They also show, she's completely right, and as far as unemployment, they never show you the fact that Kentucky and Tennessee, particularly Kentucky with McConnell, half the damn state is on welfare because all the jobs have been shipped overseas, but they never show that. They only show like Harlem people standing in line, or inner city, black and brown people standing in line. It's offensive. It's offensive, and it's propaganda.
Let's jump back over to Samuel. Samuel, I know you have a couple more questions. Do you agree with Kirk Adair?
I do agree, and I also want to thank Kirk for bringing that up, because that's a very important piece that you just mentioned. And being offended, thank you. I mean, people need to know about that. People we don't see, and many times we didn't even think about those things that you just mentioned. So I want to thank you for that, Kirk. That was very important. Man, there's so much in my mind. Go ahead. You say something, Marquis, because you're good at thinking. I got some things I want to just.
There's so much going on, right?
Yeah.
Sam Schwartz, as much as some of the listeners will find what you're saying preposterous, you make a lot of sense. And that is uncomfortable for people, because the idea of socialism is so radical. and so extreme that it would mean everyone actually being on the same playing field. Would you, you know, and when I asked the question about is the executive branch trying to compromise the judicial and the congressional branches, Kirk Adair says the judicial branch has been compromised for a while, okay? And so when, you know, Sam, when I ask about congressional, and you describe yourself as a socialist, would you say that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez falls into the true definition of a socialist?
No,
Why?
because she she works in the Democratic Party, which is a capitalist party, and it's part of the ruling class. They're the representatives. Although they pose to be the representatives of working class people, they're the representatives of the ruling class. They come off light. They promise a lot of things. They've come off calm. What they're doing now is they're trying to change the narrative from a revolutionary narrative to one that's more can be easily handled and distorted, and people will become confused by the Democrats. That's what they're trying to do. They're not, and as far as extreme, well, let's say 3 months ago, 2 months ago, no, let's say 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, people would have said, do away with the police force, well, defund the police, burn down a police station. That's extreme. What are you, crazy? No, but guess what? This is not the same. This is not the same group of people that were out 20, 30 years ago protesting for civil rights. I'm sorry, it's more than that. It's my,
okay.
It's me.
And it sounds like
Sam, those generation, my generation, failed, or they but they brought the seeds into the next generation, and now this is now taking root, and now it's grown. They not only want to get rid of, not only defund, that's kind of a confused thing, or get rid of police. You have to get rid of the cops. Once you know who they are, police are part of the force that the ruling class uses to put us down. All of us, if we get out of line. We fall into the trap of saying that these looters, to answer your question, that these looters who are downtrodden, they are miserable. They haven't gotten anything out of society, and those people they don't understand. When you loot a store or mom and pop stores, you're feeding into the hands of the government, which is the ruling class.
Right, and you're damaging.
And trying to separate all these working class people. They don't understand that, but that's what they do inadvertently. They're playing into those hands.
Okay.
All right, Sam. May I ask, Sam? I'm a little confused when you say AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that she's with the Democrats, and then you say that that's the ruling class, which I can see, but you also said that it's capitalist. But I thought that the Republicans are capitalist. I thought the Democrats are more for the people.
They're capitalists. They're working for the capitalists. I don't care what they call themselves, whether Democrats or independent. They're working inside the capitalist system. They're working for the ruling class. Those people that meet at Davos, were you invited? Was I invited? Were any working class people invited, unless they were there to be, shut up and stay, mind their business, right?
Right, but she even she even
this Black Lives Movement is wonderful. It's a step up in the level of political understanding of what needs to be done. It's not extreme. It's happening all over the world. Wake up.
Okay. Sam, go ahead, Samuel. Add in.
Yeah. So, but AOC was even against having like Amazon move into New York City because of the capitalism.
Wait a minute. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm going to add in on that one. Samuel, I apologize, but she was 100% correct. The work policies that exist for Amazon are atrocious.
That's right.
They're not fulfillment centers. They are warehouses. People are sustaining injuries on these jobs, and Amazon is throwing them away like discarded cattle. Okay, we've got the pork belly, and we've got the the roast, and we've got the rump. So let's just throw everything else out.
People are being injured and everything.
But
Amazon is not the example of the type of business that we need in a blue state like New York. It's not.
But I believe that wasn't. I wasn't in New York. I wasn't in the States at the time. But my understanding was what Amazon was bringing to, I think it was Queens, New York.
Yeah,
What
it was Long
Amazon,
City.
yeah, what Amazon was bringing was more on the, not the fulfillment side or the warehouse side, but the technical side. It was supposed to be a lot of high-end jobs.
No,
That's not true.
paying him bupkis.
Okay,
what Amazon wanted was absolute rubbish, and they got it anyway. They wanted 5 or 6 million, or more than that. I mean, $10 million to come to the state. They wanted to gentrify a neighborhood and ruin the people that were living there. They wanted them all out.
Right.
The people that work for Amazon in the first place have to go on food stamps because they're not paid enough. They're not given any sick days or that sort of thing. All right. He wanted all of this money, and he didn't want to pay one dime in taxes.
Right.
Nothing for the infrastructure. He just wants to, and he does that wherever he goes. That's why he moved out of Seattle. They asked him for taxes, and he said no.
This is the violence of capitalism, and nobody talks about that. I haven't heard. This is the capitalists doing that. They destroy small businesses.
Yeah,
they
but
destroy
this
the
idea,
competition.
this idea of
Capitalism is about
capitalism, this idea of capitalism is exactly
hold on,
what
guys. Hold on.
For the Russian Revolution. I mean, it's appalling. And Ocasio-Cortez was correct. And despite that, Amazon is still coming to the state. They still got their warehouses. They just moved into the rail yards that Bloomberg redid. So all their offices are right there in the rail yards right now. They've moved in since January. It's a load of crap. And Cuomo is up to his eyeballs in it, because what you're saying about the Democrats is they're just corporate capitalists. They say they're doing something for the people. It's a load of bullshit.
Okay.
Corporate capitalists have been bought off and paid off.
So
Right.
Kirk Adair, you sound like you're agreeing with Sam Schwartz. I see that Cherokee agrees with some of what's said. And just so the audience knows, I am down the street from the area that Kirk Adair is referring to. It's called Hudson Yards.
Right.
It's anchored by a shopping center whose anchor department store is Neiman Marcus. It is considered a super affluent area. It is to house, in addition to Amazon, additional Google offices. It's to house Apple offices.
There was nothing there before.
Repeat that, Cherokee, please.
There was nothing there before other than the Javits Center.
Yes. So the Javits
No
is
housing, no fair housing or anything.
and the reason why it is referred to as Hudson Yards is because it's a train yard that that received a concrete platform, and so everything is being built on top of the concrete platform. Wow. So there is capitalism at its best there at the Hudson Yards, and I say that sort of tongue in cheek. Samuel, does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, you guys are supporting what you're saying, so it sounds good. Sounds right. Not good, but right.
I will say, though, to the panel and to the audience, I, as the host of the show, have made a very conscious choice not to give money to Amazon. In my mind, Amazon, very similar to Walmart, wipes out small businesses.
Right.
And, New York is a city that we are about entrepreneurship. Yes. Micro businesses have to grow to small businesses. Small businesses want to grow to mid-sized businesses. And in some cases, corporations serve a role. But when you have a society that's very corporate heavy, you get a person that is worth $24 billion. How does one spend $24 billion in their lifetime? And I want to add that Bezos did not create a philanthropical arm until he started getting bad press. So let's be very, very clear about that. So Samuel, would you say, are you still a supporter of Amazon? I don't know.
I don't.
I never said I support them. I
You
never
never
said
did.
I support Amazon.
Okay.
I've never bought anything from them.
By
I'm
the way,
aware of them.
Marquis,
Yes,
the
Kirk.
other problem with Amazon is because now they're a monopoly, they have decided to stop printing certain books, like Nine, which was by Rachel Carson, and her other books, the food and the poison sprays and all that. They've simply removed them. They won't publish those books. They won't. And so not only is it a monopoly, but it's also now abridging the freedom of the press. They say that they're a capitalist corporation, but now they've become an editorial corporation. I mean, for instance, Doubleday would publish books on both sides of the
That's right.
political divide. They would publish, but Amazon has decided that there's a very specific agenda, and they just simply started eliminating books. That's that is the essence of 1984.
That's dangerous. That's
Very
so dangerous.
dangerous.
Next,
So,
they'll be burning books. Jesus Christ.
and let's be clear about the fact that Jeff Bezos is the same owner of the Washington Post,
Absolutely.
which is the newspaper that uncovered the Watergate scandal with Republican President Richard Nixon. So, Samuel, when you hear that, do you find? I'm just curious of what goes through your mind as a person who leans right. What goes through your mind when you hear the Washington Post?
I'm me myself, right? I don't like a lot of news because I believe that there's a lot of bias. So I pick and choose what I hear, and I pay attention to really what I'm interested in. I've heard the Washington Post is quite biased and against this president and things like that. If you're going to report the news, it has to be honest and accurate. So therefore,
Well, Trump is a newsmaker, brother.
Yeah. But if you're going to report the news, you need to report it honest and accurately. You can't just report what you want to report and put your slight and your bias on it. Yeah, then it's not news. Then it's opinion, right? So I don't want to hear a news outlet if they're not reporting the news. Then I'm not interested. So in terms of Amazon and Washington Post and Bezos and Washington, I'm not really interested because there's a lot of slight. There's a lot of bias.
Well, we're now in a society where judges are floating in the river. We're in a society where we're demonizing the press. We're in a society where we're saying we're taking out full-page ads in a newspaper like the New York Times, that liberal bastion, the New York Times, and we're saying, give them the death penalty without giving people a fair trial. And interestingly enough, they were found not guilty. Trump is certainly a newsmaker, and I don't think that anyone needs to create much of a story because he sort of creates his own stories. But Sam, do you follow Trump on Twitter? Samuel, I'm sorry. Do you follow Trump on Twitter?
No, I don't. I don't.
Why is that?
I don't have Twitter.
That's a good
answer. I'm
Okay.
not into it. I think
the news used to be objective.
there's
When
too
I
much
was growing
gossip.
up, it was objective.
Yeah,
Now
I don't want to hear gossip everywhere.
That's right. It's not objective. Who cares? The things that they talk about, who cares about how that person's living? That's gossip. And
so let's
news.
allow me to be self-centered here because we're down to 6 minutes. Sam Schwartz, would you call this show objective?
Oh, I wasn't
Objective?
talking about us.
Yes.
What do you mean by objective? How do you mean that?
I'm
You know
just
what the
asking
word
you a
is?
question. Would you call this talk show panel that you're sitting on, would you call this show objective?
Well, it allows us to bring in various subjective point of view. So I guess in that sense, it's objective. But it's also,
It's
yeah.
also,
But also, it's the questions are narrowed down to, we can't expand expand on the meanings of things that you believe in. So maybe, so it's both. It's subjective and objective at the same time.
okay. Cherokee Black, would you call Verbal Assault live stream an objective show?
I would, because we all come from a different place with regards to what we're talking about. So I mean, because there are things that I hear that I didn't necessarily agree with before, but now I'm looking at it saying, oh yeah, you know what? That's a point. You know, and it's I'm thinking differently now. I'm learning, you know, we're learning from each other.
Kirkader, when you came onto the program originally, many of your thoughts were very left-leaning, and you were anti-Trump. You now say that you want to vote for Trump. Do you feel that this platform has allowed your thinking to modify because of some of the opinions that you've heard and things you've discovered?
Partially, yeah, but a lot of them, I would say yes to the most part. But a lot of the my change of opinion, okay, has been due to the fact that I've been observing the mainstream media which has an agenda. I then discovered a lot of the stuff that was going on, partially through this, but mainly through other news sources with regard to, I'm not a fan of his in many ways, and it's very difficult to like the man because he has a very different, no, serious, very difficult.
Careful, I'm drinking water. I almost choked.
Because he has some unfortunate opinions, but what he is actually doing behind the scenes, freeing children, dealing with the deep state, really prosecuting pedophiles, which is a deep problem that this country refuses to look at. We haven't even discussed it on this.
We need to talk about that, about
he's moving forward on that, with the objection of both parties, with the objection of the media which are involved, with the objection of incredibly powerful people that are involved. And with that, you know, I do give him props on that. I think that it's, as I said to
I have 2 minutes.
Family friend, as I said to a member of the family, it's like a bull in a china shop. You know, if he would come out with more revelations of what they're actually doing instead of what it appears they're doing, I think that a lot more of the public would be aware of what's going on. I mean, he's very much aware of the brutality of the police force. You know, his objection is more like General Patton. It's like, well, if there's a riot, then you send in the army. Yeah, right. But the point is that you have to address the underlying economic problem, which is horrendous.
Okay.
And he's been lumped with it, and he's been lumped with it by Republicans and Democrats since Hiram Walker Bush Sr., which is what I was discussing about.
I think you're very confused.
And I'm sorry, guys, because we have to wrap up soon. We have to wrap up soon. Did you want to add something very quick, Sam Schwartz? It's got to be less than 10 seconds.
Yeah, I think he's very confused. How can you? Very confused. Trump represents the ruling class. He is a billionaire. He is in that class. He's doing things that he's required to do in that class. The only problem is that he's got some limitations. And what he's doing is exposing the ruling class to everybody else. He's exposing them. People see
Thank
that.
you.
And what about children? What about all these children that came north?
Cutting in, sorry. Because I'm getting a signal to wrap up, Sam Schwartz. I apologize for that. Cherokee Black, you mentioned that you were interested in having a subject talked about that you don't feel is being discussed openly. What was that?
Pedophilia. There are rings of wealthy people that are abducting children and using them sexually
Okay.
for child
I'm gonna
porn
make,
and other things.
I'm going to make it a point. Samuel and I will make it a point to make sure that that is a discussion for next week. Tomorrow's subject is defund the police. Now that's a thought. I'm Marquis Devereaux, Verbal Assault live stream. You're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, as well as 11 other platforms. We can be viewed on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Please join us on tomorrow's program. We go a little bit lighter, normally on Fridays, but defund the police. I don't know how light that one's going to be. I thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.